The Dispenser of Holy Water, a short story by Guy de Maupassant. He lived formerly in a little house beside the high road outside the village. He had set up in business as a wheelwright after marrying the daughter of a farmer of the neighborhood, and as they were both industrious, they managed to save up a nice little fortune. But they had no children, and this caused them great sorrow. Finally, a son was born, whom they named Jean. They both loved and petted him, enfolding him with their affection, and were unwilling to let him be out of their sight. When he was 5 years old, some mountebanks passed through the country and set up their tent in the town hall square. Jean, who had seen them pass by, made his escape from the house, and after his father had made a long search for him, he found him among the learned goats and trick dogs, uttering shouts of laughter and sitting on the knees of an old clown. 3 days later, just as they were sitting down to dinner, the wheelwright and his wife noticed that their son was not in the house. They looked for him in the garden, and as they did not find him, his father went out into the road and shouted at the top of his voice, "Jean!" Night came on. A brown vapour arose, making distant objects look still farther away and giving them a dismal, weird appearance. 3 tall pines, close at hand, seemed to be weeping. Still there was no reply, but the air appeared to be full of indistinct sighing. The father listened for some time, thinking he heard a sound first in one direction, then in another, and almost beside himself he ran out into the night, calling incessantly, "Jean! Jean!" He ran along thus until daybreak, filling the darkness with his shouts, terrifying stray animals, torn by a terrible anguish, and fearing that he was losing his mind. His wife, seated on the stone step of their home, sobbed until morning. They did not find their son. They both aged rapidly in their inconsolable sorrow. Finally, they sold their house and set out to search together. They inquired of the shepherds on the hillsides, of the tradesmen passing by, of the peasants in the villages, and of the authorities in the towns. But their boy had been lost a long time, and no one knew anything about him. He had probably forgotten his own name by this time, and also the name of his village, and his parents wept in silence, having lost hope. Before long, their money came to an end, and they worked out by the day in the farms and inns, doing the most menial work, eating what was left from the tables, sleeping on the ground and suffering from cold. Then, as they became enfeebled by hard work, no one would employ them any longer, and they were forced to beg along the high roads. They accosted passers-by in an entreating voice and with sad, discouraged faces. They begged a morsel of bread from the harvesters who were dining around a tree in the fields at noon, and they ate in silence, seated on the edge of a ditch. An innkeeper to whom they told their story said to them one day, "I know someone who had lost their daughter, and they found her in Paris." They at once set out for Paris. When they entered the great city, they were bewildered by its size and by the crowds that they saw, but they knew that Jean must be in the midst of all these people, though they did not know how to set about looking for him. Then they feared that they might not recognize him, for he was only 5 years old when they last saw him. They visited every place, went through all the streets, stopping whenever they saw a group of people, hoping for some providential meeting, some extraordinary luck, some compassionate fate. They frequently walked at haphazard straight ahead, leaning one against the other, looking so sad and poverty-stricken that people would give them alms without their asking. They spent every Sunday at the doors of the churches, watching the crowds entering and leaving, trying to distinguish among the faces one that might be familiar. Several times they thought they recognized him, but always found they had made a mistake. In the vestibule of one of the churches which they visited, the most frequently, there was an old dispenser of holy water who had become their friend. He also had a very sad history, and their sympathy for him had established a bond of close friendship between them. It ended by them all 3 living together in a poor lodging on the top floor of a large house situated at some distance, quite on the outskirts of the city, and the wheelwright would sometimes take his new friend's place at the church when the latter was ill. Winter came, a very severe winter. The poor holy water sprinkler died, and the parish priest appointed the wheelwright, whose misfortunes had come to his knowledge, to replace him. He went every morning and sat in the same place, on the same chair, wearing away the old stone pillar by continually leaning against it. He would gaze steadily at every man who entered the church and looked forward to Sunday with as much impatience as a schoolboy, for on that day the church was filled with people from morning till night. He became very old, growing weaker each day from the dampness of the church, and his hope oozed away gradually. He now knew by sight all the people who came to the services. He knew their hours, their manners, could distinguish their step on the stone pavement. His interest had become so contracted that the entrance of a stranger in the church was for him a great event. One day, two ladies came in. One was old, the other young, a mother and daughter probably. Behind them came a man who was following them. He bowed to them as they came out, and after offering them some holy water, he took the arm of the elder lady. That must be the fiancé of the younger one, thought the wheelwright. And until evening, he kept trying to recall where he had formerly seen a young man who resembled this one. But the one he was thinking of must be an old man by this time, for it seemed as if he had known him down home in his youth. The same man frequently came again to walk home with the ladies, and this vague, distant, familiar resemblance which he could not place worried the old man so much that he made his wife come with him to see if she could help his impaired memory. One evening, as it was growing dusk, the three strangers entered together. When they had passed, the old man said, "Well, do you know him?" His wife anxiously tried to ransack her memory. Suddenly she said in a low tone, "Yes, yes, but he is darker, taller, stouter, and is dressed like a gentleman. But father, all the same, it is your face when you were young." The old man started violently. It was true. He looked like himself, and also like his brother who was dead, and like his father, whom he remembered while he was yet young. The old couple were so affected that they could not speak. The three persons came out and were about to leave the church. The man touched his finger to the holy water sprinkler. Then the old man, whose hand was trembling so that he was fairly sprinkling the ground with holy water, exclaimed, "Jean!" The young man stopped and looked at him. He repeated in a lower tone, "Jean!" The two women looked at them without understanding. He then said for the third time, sobbing as he did so, "Jean!" The man stooped down, with his face close to the old man's, and as a memory of his childhood dawned on him, he replied, "Papa Pierre, Mama Jean." He had forgotten everything, his father's surname and the name of his native place, but he always remembered those two words that he had so often repeated, "Papa Pierre, Mama Jeanne." He sank to the floor, his face on the old man's knees, and he wept, kissing now his father and then his mother, while they were almost breathless from intense joy. The two ladies also wept, understanding as they did that some great happiness had come to pass. Then they all went to the young man's house, and he told them his history. The circus people had carried him off. For 3 years he travelled with them in various countries. Then the troupe disbanded, and one day an old lady in a chateau had paid to have him stay with her because she liked his appearance. As he was intelligent, he was sent to school, then to college, and the old lady, having no children, had left him all her money. He, for his part, had tried to find his parents, but as he could remember only the two names, Papa Pierre, Mama Jeanne, he had been unable to do so. Now he was about to be married, and he introduced his fiancée, who was very good and very pretty. When the two old people had told their story in their turn, he kissed them once more. They sat up very late that night, not daring to retire lest the happiness they had so long sought should escape them again while they were asleep. But misfortune had lost its hold on them, and they were happy for the rest of their lives. Beside Schopenhauer's corpse, a short story by Guy de Maupassant. He was slowly dying, as consumptives die. I saw him each day, about 2 o'clock, sitting beneath the hotel windows on a bench in the promenade, looking out on the calm sea. He remained for some time without moving, in the heat of the sun, gazing mournfully at the Mediterranean. Every now and then he cast a glance at the lofty mountains with beclouded summits that shut in Mentone. Then, with a very slow movement, he would cross his long legs, so thin that they seemed like two bones, around which fluttered the cloth of his trousers, and he would open a book, always the same book. And then he did not stir any more, but read on with his eye and his mind. All his wasting body seemed to read, all his soul plunged, lost, disappeared in this book, up to the hour when the cool air made him cough a little. Then he got up and re-entered the hotel. He was a tall German with fair beard, who breakfasted and dined in his own room and spoke to nobody. A vague curiosity attracted me to him. One day I sat down by his side, having taken up a book, too, to keep up appearances, a volume of Musset's poems, and I began to look through Rolla. Suddenly my neighbour said to me in good French, "Do you know German, monsieur?" "Not at all, monsieur." "I am sorry for that. Since chance has thrown us side by side, I could have lent you, I could have shown you, an inestimable thing, this book which I hold in my hand." "What is it, pray?" "It is a copy of my master, Schopenhauer, annotated with his own hand. All the margins, as you may see, are covered with his handwriting." I took the book from him reverently, and I gazed at these forms incomprehensible to me, but which revealed the immortal thoughts of the greatest shatterer of dreams who had ever dwelt on earth. And Musset's verses arose in my memory. "Hast thou found out, Voltaire, that it is bliss to die, and does thy hideous smile over thy bleached bones fly?" And involuntarily I compared the childish sarcasm, the religious sarcasm of Voltaire, with the irresistible irony of the German philosopher whose influence is henceforth ineffaceable. Let us protest, and let us be angry, let us be indignant, or let us be enthusiastic. Schopenhauer has marked humanity with the seal of his disdain and of his disenchantment. A disabused pleasure-seeker, he overthrew beliefs, hopes, poetic ideals and chimeras, destroyed the aspirations, ravaged the confidence of souls, killed love, dragged down the chivalrous worship of women, crushed the illusions of hearts, and accomplished the most gigantic task ever attempted by skepticism. He spared nothing with his mocking spirit and exhausted everything. And even today, those who execrate him seem to carry in their own souls particles of his thought. "So then, you were intimately acquainted with Schopenhauer?" I said to the German. He smiled sadly. "Up to the time of his death, monsieur." And he spoke to me about the philosopher and told me about the almost supernatural impression which this strange being made on all who came near him. He gave me an account of the interview of the old iconoclast with a French politician, a doctrinaire Republican, who wanted to get a glimpse of this man, and found him in a noisy tavern, seated in the midst of his disciples, dry, wrinkled, laughing with an unforgettable laugh, attacking and tearing to pieces ideas and beliefs with a single word, as a dog tears with one bite of his teeth the tissues with which he plays. He repeated for me the comment of this Frenchman as he went away, astonished and terrified. "I thought I had spent an hour with the devil." Then he added, "He had indeed, monsieur, a frightful smile, which terrified us even after his death. I can tell you an anecdote about it that is not generally known, if it would interest you." And he began, in a languid voice, interrupted by frequent fits of coughing. Schopenhauer had just died, and it was arranged that we should watch in turn, 2 by 2, till morning. He was lying in a large apartment, very simple, vast and gloomy. 2 wax candles were burning on the stand by the bedside. It was midnight when I went on watch, together with one of our comrades. The 2 friends whom we replaced had left the apartment, and we came and sat down at the foot of the bed. The face was not changed. It was laughing, That pucker which we knew so well lingered still around the corners of the lips, and it seemed to us that he was about to open his eyes, to move and to speak. His thought, or rather his thoughts, enveloped us. We felt ourselves more than ever in the atmosphere of his genius, absorbed, possessed by him. His domination seemed to be even more sovereign now that he was dead. A feeling of mystery was blended with the power of this incomparable spirit. The bodies of these men disappear, but they themselves remain, and in the night which follows the cessation of their heart's pulsation, I assure you, monsieur, they are terrifying. And in hushed tones we talked about him, recalling to mind certain sayings, certain formulas of his, those startling maxims which are like jets of flame flung, in a few words, into the darkness of the unknown life. "It seems to me that he is going to speak," said my comrade, and we stared with uneasiness bordering on fear at the motionless face with its eternal laugh. Gradually, we began to feel ill at ease, oppressed, on the point of fainting. I faltered. "I don't know what is the matter with me, but I assure you I am not well." And at that moment we noticed that there was an unpleasant odour from the corpse. Then my comrade suggested that we should go into the adjoining room and leave the door open, and I assented to his proposal. I took one of the wax candles which burned on the stand, and I left the second behind. Then we went and sat down at the other end of the adjoining apartment in such a position that we could see the bed and the corpse clearly revealed by the light. But he still held possession of us. One would have said that his immaterial essence, liberated, free, all-powerful and dominating, was flitting around us. And sometimes, too, the dreadful odour of the decomposed body came toward us and penetrated us, sickening and indefinable. Suddenly, a shiver passed through our bones. A sound, a slight sound, came from the death chamber. Immediately we fixed our glances on him, and we saw, yes, monsieur, we saw distinctly, both of us, something white pass across the bed, fall on the carpet, and vanish under an armchair. We were on our feet before we had time to think of anything, distracted by stupefying terror, ready to run away. Then we stared at each other. We were horribly pale. Our hearts throbbed fiercely enough to have raised the clothing on our chests. I was the first to speak. "Did you see?" "Yes, I saw." "Can it be that he is not dead?" "Why, when the body is putrefying." "What are we to do?" My companion said in a hesitating tone, "We must go and look." I took our wax candle and entered first, glancing into all the dark corners in the large apartment. Nothing was moving now, and I approached the bed, but I stood transfixed with stupor and fright. Schopenhauer was no longer laughing. He was grinning in a horrible fashion, with his lips pressed together and deep hollows in his cheeks. I stammered out, "He is not dead." But the terrible odour ascended to my nose and stifled me, and I no longer moved, but kept staring fixedly at him, terrified as if in the presence of an apparition. Then my companion, having seized the other wax candle, bent forward. Next, he touched my arm without uttering a word. I followed his glance and saw on the ground, under the armchair by the side of the bed, standing out white on the dark carpet and open as if to bite, Schopenhauer's set of artificial teeth. The work of decomposition, loosening the jaws, had made it jump out of the mouth. I was really frightened that day, monsieur. And as the sun was sinking toward the glittering sea, the consumptive German rose from his seat, gave me a parting bow, and retired into the hotel.